Admiral Jake Morrison walked into the command center at Earth's Central Command, with his morning coffee still warm in his hands. The large room buzzed with activity as officers worked at their stations, monitoring communications from human colonies across the galaxy. Jake had been doing this job for 20 years, and he knew the sounds of a normal day. Today felt different. The first sign of trouble came from Lieutenant Amy Clark at the communications desk. She turned in her chair and called out to Jake with worry in her voice. "Admiral, we haven't heard from New Haven Colony in 3 days. Their daily check-in is overdue." Jake set down his coffee and walked over to Amy's station. New Haven was one of humanity's newest colonies, built on a beautiful planet in the Outer Rim territories. 12 million humans called it home, including many families who had left Earth to start new lives among the stars. The colony sent daily status reports without fail. "Have you tried all the backup channels?" Jake asked. Amy nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Primary communications, emergency frequencies, even the old radio systems. Nothing but silence." Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. In space, silence usually meant something terrible had happened. He looked at the star map showing New Haven's location, far from Earth but still within the safe zone that humanity controlled. Commander Lisa Carter entered the command center at that moment, carrying a datapad in her shaking hands. Lisa had been Jake's friend for 15 years, and he had never seen her look so scared. She walked straight to him without stopping to talk to anyone else. "Jake, we need to talk privately," Lisa said in a low voice. They moved to Jake's office, a small room behind the main command center. Lisa closed the door and sat down heavily in a chair across from Jake's desk. "The probe data came back from New Haven," Lisa began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jake, the colony is gone. Completely gone." Jake stared at her for a long moment, not wanting to believe what he had heard. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" Lisa activated her datapad and projected a holographic image into the air between them. The image showed what should have been New Haven's main city, but instead there was nothing but burned ground and twisted metal. Where once stood tall buildings and green parks, now only black ash remained. "Our probe scanned the entire planet," Lisa continued. "No life signs, no structures, no survivors. The cities have been burned to the ground with some kind of plasma weapons." Jake stood up and walked to the window that looked out over Earth's blue oceans. Behind him, more images appeared showing the complete destruction of New Haven. Every city, every farm, every small settlement had been wiped from existence. "Who did this?" Jake asked without turning around. "They left their mark," Lisa replied. She changed the hologram to show a crimson banner planted in the ruins of New Haven's Capitol building. The banner carried the symbol of the Vorthak Empire, a race of silicon-based aliens who controlled 12 star systems in the far regions of space. Jake turned back to face Lisa, his expression hard as stone. "The Vorthak. Why would they attack New Haven? We've had no contact with them." Lisa pulled up more data on her pad. "According to our intelligence files, the Vorthak consider all carbon-based life forms to be inferior. They call species like humans infestations that need to be cleaned from the galaxy." The full weight of the situation hit Jake like a physical blow. 12 million innocent people, including children who had never hurt anyone, had been murdered simply because they were human. The Vorthak had committed genocide without warning or provocation. Jake walked back to his desk and pressed a button that connected him to all the senior officers in the building. "This is Admiral Morrison. I need all department heads in conference. Room Alpha immediately. Priority 1 emergency." Within minutes, the conference room filled with Earth's top military leaders. Jake stood at the head of the table and activated the holographic display showing the destruction of New Haven. 3 days ago, the Vorthak Empire attacked and completely destroyed New Haven Colony, Jake announced. 12 million humans are dead. There are no survivors. The room erupted in angry voices as officers demanded answers and explanations. General Patricia King, head of the Marine Corps, slammed her fist on the table. "Those alien bastards murdered our people," she shouted. "We need to hit them back and hit them hard." Captain Ryan Phillips, Jake's aide and tactical advisor, raised his hand to speak. "Admiral, Our current fleet strength is spread across 50 star systems. If we're going to respond to this attack, we'll need to recall ships from all over human space. Jake looked around the table at the faces of people he trusted with humanity's future. These were good people who had dedicated their lives to protecting human colonies and keeping Earth safe. Now they faced the worst attack in human history. "I want every available warship recalled to Earth," Jake said quietly. "Every destroyer, every cruiser, every battleship, every carrier. I want our entire fleet assembled here within 72 hours. Admiral Susan Wright, head of the Navy's Logistics Division, looked up from her datapad with wide eyes. "Jake, that's 700,000 ships. Are you sure you want to mobilize our entire fleet?" Jake walked to the window and looked up at the stars where somewhere the Vorthak were probably celebrating their victory. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute determination. "The Vorthak wanted to send humanity a message by destroying New Haven," Jake said. "They wanted to show us that human lives mean nothing to them. They think we're weak because we value peace and try to avoid war." He turned back to face the room full of officers who were waiting for his decision. "Now we're going to send the Vorthak a message in return," Jake continued. "We're going to show them what happens when you murder 12 million innocent humans. We're going to show them that humanity doesn't just roll over and die when attacked." Captain Phillips cleared his throat. "Sir, 700,000 warships is the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The logistics alone will be incredibly complex." Jake nodded slowly. "I understand the challenges, Ryan. But the Vorthak need to learn that actions have consequences. They chose to start this war by committing genocide against our people. Now we're going to finish it." The meeting continued for 3 more hours as the officers planned the massive undertaking of assembling humanity's entire military force. Messages were sent to every human ship in space, ordering them to return to Earth immediately. The greatest mobilization in human history had begun, all because an alien race had decided that human lives had no value. As the officers filed out of the conference room to begin their preparations, Jake remained behind, staring at the images of New Haven's destruction. 12 million faces stared back at him from his memory, people he had never met but who had died under his protection. He made a silent promise to each of them that their deaths would not go unanswered. The space around Earth transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Ships began arriving from every corner of human space, answering Admiral Jake Morrison's call for the complete mobilization of humanity's fleet. The first ships appeared as tiny dots of light against the blackness, but within hours, those dots became streams of vessels flowing toward Earth like rivers of steel and fire. Fleet Admiral Kate Johnson stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the incredible sight through the massive viewing windows. The Retribution was humanity's largest warship, a supercarrier that stretched 5 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Kate had commanded this ship for 8 years, but she had never seen anything like what was happening around Earth. "Status report from all incoming battle groups," Kate called out to her bridge crew. Lieutenant Alex Turner looked up from his console, his eyes wide with amazement. "Admiral, we have ships arriving from every system in human space. The Mars Defense Fleet just dropped out of hyperspace with 2,000 vessels. The Jupiter mining protection units are forming up behind them with another 1,500 ships." Kate nodded as she watched a group of massive battleships slide into formation near the Retribution. These were the heavy hitters of humanity's fleet, ships designed to stand toe-to-toe with any enemy and slug it out until only one side remained standing. "What about the deep space patrols?" Kate asked. "They're coming in too," Alex replied. "Even the exploration ships have been armed and integrated into our strike force. Admiral Morrison's order was clear. Every ship that can fight is being called home." The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Warships of every size and type filled the space around Earth, from nimble destroyers that could dance around enemy fire to massive dreadnoughts that could punch through any defense. Each ship represented years of human engineering and the dedication of thousands of workers who had built them in Earth's orbital shipyards. Captain Ben Taylor commanded one of humanity's newest ships, the experimental stealth vessel UES Shadow Strike. His ship was invisible to most sensors and could slip through enemy defenses without being detected. Ben watched the growing fleet from his hidden position and marveled at the coordination required to bring so many ships together. "Captain, we're receiving updates from Intelligence Division," reported his communications officer, Ensign Julie Martinez. "They've located the Vorthak home system. It's called Kralos Prime, heavily fortified with orbital defense platforms." Ben studied the intelligence data as it appeared on his main screen. The Vorthak had built their entire civilization around the concept of war and conquest. Their homeworld was surrounded by massive space stations bristling with weapons, and their fleet was arranged in defensive formations that had never been breached by any enemy. "How many ships do the Vorthak have?" Ben asked. Julie checked her data again. "Approximately 50,000 vessels in their entire armada, sir. Most of them are concentrated around their home system." Ben did the math in his head and felt a grim smile cross his face. 50,000 Vorthak ships against 700,000 human vessels. The odds were 14-1 in humanity's favor, but Ben knew better than to underestimate any enemy who had survived long enough to build an interstellar empire. Meanwhile, Admiral Morrison worked around the clock in Earth's Central Command, coordinating the massive logistical undertaking. Supply ships moved between the warships, transferring ammunition, fuel, and food supplies. Repair vessels worked on ships that had suffered damage during their rush back to Earth. Medical ships prepared for the casualties that would inevitably come from the battle ahead. Dr. Helen Brooks, humanity's leading expert on alien biology, briefed Morrison on what they knew about the Vorthak. She stood in front of a holographic display showing the silicon-based aliens in their natural form, tall and angular beings that looked like living crystal formations. "The Vorthak are unlike any enemy we've faced before," Dr. Brooks explained. "They don't think like us. To them, destroying New Haven was no different from a human spraying pesticide on insects. They genuinely don't understand why we would seek revenge for something they consider routine pest control." Morrison listened carefully, knowing that understanding the enemy's mindset would be crucial to victory. "What drives them? What do they want?" "Purity," Dr. Brooks replied. "They believe that silicon-based life is the only true form of intelligence in the universe. Every carbon-based species they encounter is seen as a contamination that must be cleansed. They've wiped out dozens of civilizations over the centuries." Colonel Sam Mitchell, head of the fleet's Marine contingent, spoke up from his seat at the conference table. "Then we'll teach them what human contamination can do when it fights back. My Marines are ready to board their ships and show them what close combat really means." The human fleet continued to grow as more ships arrived from distant patrol routes. Captain Danny Foster brought in a squadron of fast attack vessels from the Centauri system. Commander Michelle Gray led a group of heavy cruisers from the mining operations near Sirius. Lieutenant Commander Peter Walsh arrived with a deep space exploration fleet, their ships hastily fitted with military-grade weapons. Each arrival was logged and integrated into the overall battle plan. Admiral Johnson worked with her tactical staff to organize the massive fleet into manageable battle groups. Alpha Group consisted of the heavy battleships and dreadnoughts. Beta Group contained the fast attack vessels and destroyers. Gamma Group was made up of the carriers and their fighter squadrons. "Admiral, we're receiving long-range sensor data from our scout ships," reported Commander Lisa Carter, who had been promoted to Morrison's chief intelligence officer. "The Vorthak have detected our fleet assembly and they're mobilizing their own forces." Morrison studied the tactical display showing both fleets preparing for war. The human force was massive but spread out across multiple star systems. The Vorthak fleet was smaller but concentrated and experienced in warfare. "How long before we're ready to move out?" Morrison asked. Admiral Johnson consulted her logistics reports. 72 hours, sir. We need that time to complete fueling, operations, and final weapons checks. Moving a fleet this size is like relocating an entire civilization." Morrison nodded and turned to address all the senior officers present in the command center. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're about to undertake has never been attempted before in galactic history. 700,000 warships moving as one force toward a single objective." He paused and looked each of them in the eye before continuing. "The Vorthak think they can murder 12 million humans and face no consequences. They believe we're weak because we prefer peace to war. They're about to learn that human patience has limits, and they crossed those limits when they destroyed New Haven." Captain Ryan Phillips raised his hand to speak. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests that other alien species are watching this conflict closely. The outcome will determine how humanity is viewed throughout the galaxy. Morrison walked to the viewing window that showed the assembled fleet stretching beyond the horizon of space. Hundreds of thousands of ships floated in perfect formation, their running lights creating a constellation of human determination. Then, let's make sure the galaxy gets the right message, Morrison said. When alien species look at humanity after this war, I want them to know two things. First, that we will respond to genocide with overwhelming force. Second, that we will show mercy to those who surrender and seek redemption. The final preparations continued as Earth's greatest fleet prepared to depart for enemy territory. Supply. Officers checked ammunition stores one last time. Engineering teams ran final diagnostics on hyperspace drives. Medical personnel prepared for the wounded who would return from battle. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution alongside Admiral Johnson and watched the final ships take their positions. The sight was magnificent. 700,000 vessels of war arranged in perfect formation, ready to carry humanity's justice to the stars. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump, announced Lieutenant Turner from his communications station. Morrison picked up the fleet-wide communication device and prepared to address every human in the massive armada. "This is Admiral Morrison to all ships," he began, his voice carrying across the void to 700,000 vessels. "We go now to face an enemy that believes human lives have no value. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you harm innocent humans. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump to Kralos Prime." The massive human fleet entered hyperspace in perfectly coordinated waves, their destination the Vorthak home system of Kralos Prime, located 800 light-years from Earth. The journey would take 2 weeks, giving both sides time to prepare for what would certainly become the largest space battle in galactic history. Admiral Jake Morrison spent the first few days of the journey studying everything humanity knew about the Vorthak Empire. He sat in his private quarters aboard the UES Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing Vorthak ship designs, their military tactics, and the layout of their home system. The more he learned, the more he understood that this enemy was unlike anything humanity had faced before. Dr. Helen Brooks joined Morrison for daily briefings, sharing her expertise on Vorthak biology and psychology. She had spent years studying the few encounters between humans and Vorthak that had occurred over the decades, building a profile of their alien mindset. "The Vorthak are ancient," Dr. Brooks explained during one of their sessions. "They've been conquering other species for over 1,000 years. To them, warfare isn't just a tool of expansion, it's a religious duty. They believe that by destroying carbon-based life, they're purifying the galaxy." Morrison leaned back in his chair, processing this information. "So they won't surrender easily. They'll see our attack as confirmation that we need to be destroyed." "Exactly," Dr. Brooks nodded. "But there's something else you need to understand, Admiral. The Vorthak have never faced an enemy that outnumbered them. Their entire military doctrine is based on having superior technology and firepower to overcome larger but less advanced forces." This gave Morrison hope. The Vorthak might be experienced warriors, but they had never planned for a scenario where they were outnumbered 14-1 by an equally advanced enemy. Meanwhile, throughout the fleet, preparations for battle continued around the clock. Colonel Sam Mitchell worked with his Marine commanders to plan boarding operations against Vorthak ships. The aliens were larger and stronger than humans, but human Marines were trained for close-quarters combat in the tight corridors of enemy vessels. "Remember, the Vorthak think we're weak," Mitchell told his battalion commanders during a briefing. "They've never fought humans before, so they don't know what we're capable of when we're angry. Let's keep it that way until we surprise them." Captain Ben Taylor used the journey time to position his stealth ships for maximum effectiveness. The UES Shadow Strike and her sister ships would slip ahead of the main fleet, gathering intelligence and preparing to strike at key targets when the battle began. "Our job is to map their defensive positions and find the weak spots," Taylor explained to his crew. "The Vorthak have never dealt with human stealth technology. We can get close enough to count the rivets on their hull plating." The Vorthak weren't sitting idle during humanity's approach. Their long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet, and panic spread through their command structure as they realized the scale of the human response. For the first time in their history, the Vorthak faced an enemy that vastly outnumbered them. Commander Greg Parker led the human reconnaissance squadron that monitored Vorthak movements. His ships stayed at the edge of sensor range, watching as the aliens pulled vessels from all their occupied territories to defend their homeworld. "Admiral, the Vorthak are recalling ships from 12 star systems," Parker reported during one of his regular updates. Current count shows they've assembled 70,000 vessels around Kralos Prime. They're also deploying some kind of orbital defense grid. Morrison studied the intelligence data showing the growing Vorthak defenses. The aliens had positioned massive weapons platforms in orbit around their homeworld, creating overlapping fields of fire that would challenge any attacking force. But Morrison noticed something interesting in their defensive arrangement. "They're setting up for a defensive battle," Morrison observed during a strategy meeting with his senior officers. "The Vorthak have never been attacked in their home system. They don't know how to handle this situation." Admiral Kate Johnson pointed to the tactical display showing Vorthak ship positions. "Their formation is designed to protect their planet, not to conduct mobile operations. If we can draw them away from those orbital platforms, we'll have a significant advantage." The human fleet encountered something unexpected as they neared Vorthak space, refugee ships fleeing the war zone. These vessels belonged to various alien species that had been enslaved by the Vorthak over the centuries, and news of humanity's approach had given them hope for freedom. One refugee ship requested permission to dock with the UES Retribution. The vessel was badly damaged and carried survivors from the Zalani, a peaceful species that had been conquered by the Vorthak 300 years earlier. The Zalani leader, a being that looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus, spoke to Morrison through translation devices. Its name was difficult for humans to pronounce, so it chose the human name David for easier communication. "Admiral Morrison," David said, its voice carrying the weight of centuries of suffering. "My people have waited 300 years for someone to challenge the Vorthak. We never dreamed it would be the humans." Morrison listened carefully as David shared intelligence about Vorthak weaknesses and the layout of their home system. The Zalani had been forced to work in Vorthak shipyards and knew details about their technology that human intelligence had never discovered. "The Vorthak fear you more than they will admit," David revealed. "Word of your approach has spread throughout the galaxy. Other species call you the persistence predators, the ones who never give up the hunt." This information gave Morrison new insight into humanity's reputation among alien species. While humans saw themselves as peaceful explorers who reluctantly fought when necessary, other species viewed them as relentless hunters who would pursue their enemies across the galaxy. "What do the Vorthak know about human military capabilities?" Morrison asked. David's translated voice carried what sounded like amusement. "They know you have many ships, but they think you lack the will to use them effectively. The Vorthak believe that carbon-based life forms are inherently weak because you show mercy to defeated enemies." Colonel Mitchell spoke up from his position at the conference table. "They're about to learn that human mercy has to be earned. After what they did to New Haven, they'll need to surrender unconditionally before we consider showing any restraint." As the human fleet entered the final phase of their journey, Morrison addressed the entire armada one more time. 700,000 ships maintained their formation as they approached the edge of Vorthak space, their crews ready for the battle that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. "In 6 hours, we will drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kralos system," Morrison announced over the fleet-wide communication system. "The Vorthak are waiting for us with 70,000 ships and orbital defense platforms. They think their experience and defensive advantages will be enough to defeat us." Morrison paused, looking out at the swirling colors of hyperspace that surrounded the fleet. Soon, those colors would give way to the blackness of normal space and the deadly light of plasma weapons. "The Vorthak made a critical error when they destroyed New Haven," Morrison continued. "They assumed that humans would accept the murder of 12 million innocent people without response. They thought we would be too afraid or too weak to seek justice for our dead." Throughout the fleet, human crews made final preparations for battle. Weapons officers checked their targeting systems. Engineering teams verified that all systems were operating at peak efficiency. Medical personnel prepared treatment areas for the wounded who would inevitably result from the coming conflict. Today, We show the galaxy who we really are, Morrison concluded. We are not the weak carbon-based life forms that the Vorthak think they can casually exterminate. We are humans. We remember our dead. We protect our innocent. And we never forgive those who commit genocide against our people. The human fleet continued its relentless advance toward Kralos Prime, carrying with them the hopes of enslaved species throughout Vorthak space and the determination to ensure that New Haven's dead would not go unavenged. The largest military force in galactic history was about to arrive at the doorstep of an empire that had never known defeat, and everything would change forever. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the countdown timer that showed the remaining time until they would drop out of hyperspace. In just a few hours, 700,000 human warships would face 70,000 Vorthak vessels in a battle that would reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. The journey to justice was almost over. The time for retribution was about to begin. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kralos system in perfect formation, their arrival sending shockwaves through the Vorthak command structure that monitored the borders of their home system. For the first time in their 1,000-year history of conquest, the Vorthak faced an enemy fleet that dwarfed their own forces. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as his tactical display populated with enemy contacts. The sight before them was both impressive and terrifying. The Vorthak had assembled their entire home fleet in defensive formations around their planet. Massive orbital defense platforms floated in space like metal moons, their weapons pointed outward toward the approaching human armada. "Battle stations," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying across the communication channels to 700,000 ships. "All vessels, commence Operation Righteous Fury." The space around Kralos Prime immediately transformed into the largest battlefield the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human long-range missile ships opened fire from maximum distance, launching thousands of kinetic projectiles and guided munitions that streaked across the void like deadly shooting stars. The Vorthak responded with their own weapons, creating a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded the assault carrier UES Vengeance, one of humanity's largest ship-to-ship combat vessels. Her ship carried 300 fighter squadrons, each one piloted by humans who had volunteered for the most dangerous job in the fleet. "All pilots, this is Captain Walsh," she announced over the fighter communication network. "Remember New Haven. Every Vorthak ship you destroy brings justice for 12 million innocent souls." The first wave of human fighters launched from their carriers and streaked toward the Vorthak defensive line. These small, fast ships were designed to slip through enemy fire and deliver precision strikes against crucial targets. The pilots who flew them knew that many wouldn't return, but they also knew that their sacrifice would help break the Vorthak defenses. Lieutenant Commander Danny Foster coordinated the battle from the fleet command ship, his multiple displays showing the ebb and flow of combat across three-dimensional space. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Hundreds of thousands of ships engaged in deadly combat across a volume of space larger than most solar systems. "Admiral, we're breaking through their outer defense line," Foster reported, his voice tense with concentration. "Battle groups Charlie and Delta have established fire superiority in sectors 7 through 12. The Vorthak fought with the desperation of beings who had never experienced defeat. Their ships were individually more powerful than human vessels, designed for raw firepower rather than maneuverability. But humanity's numerical advantage was overwhelming. For every Vorthak ship, there were 14 human vessels ready to engage it. Captain Ben Taylor commanded his stealth ship, UES Shadow Strike, from a position deep within Vorthak space, having slipped past their defenses during the initial assault. His mission was to gather intelligence on enemy movements and strike at high-value targets when opportunities presented themselves. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Vorthak command ship," reported his sensor officer, Ensign Carol Brooks. "It's some kind of weapon we've never seen before." Taylor studied the readings on his display and felt a chill run down his spine. The Vorthak flagship, a massive fortress-like vessel called the Dominion Spear, was powering up a weapon that generated energy patterns unlike anything in human experience. "Get me a direct channel to Admiral Morrison," Taylor ordered. "Priority Alpha emergency." The communication connected just as the Vorthak superweapon fired. A wave of invisible energy swept across the battlefield, and suddenly dozens of human ships went silent as their crews were overwhelmed by some kind of psionic attack designed to disrupt human neural patterns. All ships, activate neural shielding. Immediately, Admiral Morrison commanded over the fleet-wide network. The Vorthak are using psionic weapons. Humanity's preparation and paranoia paid off in that crucial moment. Human ships had encountered psionic attacks before during first contact with other alien species, and Earth's military had developed countermeasures. Advanced shielding technology protected human crews from mental interference, and the affected ships came back online within minutes. Admiral Kate Johnson coordinated the human response from her position commanding the reserve battle groups. She watched as waves of human ships pressed forward against increasingly desperate Vorthak resistance. Battle Group Alpha, target those orbital defense platforms, Johnson ordered. Battle Group Beta, maintain pressure on their mobile fleet. Don't let them regroup. The orbital platforms that the Vorthak had counted on for defense became targets for human heavy weapons. Massive human battleships moved into range and began methodically destroying the alien fortifications with concentrated firepower that could shatter asteroids. Colonel Sam Mitchell finally got his chance for close combat when human boarding shuttles began attaching themselves to damaged Vorthak vessels. His Marines had trained for years to fight in the cramped corridors of enemy ships, and now they put that training to use. Remember, the Vorthak are bigger and stronger than us, Mitchell told his troops over the communication system as they prepared to breach enemy hulls. But they've never fought humans in close quarters. Show them what human determination looks like. The boarding actions were brutal and decisive. Vorthak warriors were individually superior fighters, but human Marines fought with a ferocity born from the memory of New Haven's destruction. Every human soldier carried the names of the 12 million dead with them into battle. As the battle raged across multiple fronts, the tide slowly but inevitably turned in humanity's favor. The Vorthak had never faced an enemy that could absorb their best attacks and keep fighting. Human ships that were damaged or destroyed were quickly replaced by fresh vessels from the massive fleet. Captain Ryan Phillips monitored the overall battle situation from his position aboard the command ship. His tactical computers showed the statistical reality of the conflict. Humanity was winning through sheer weight of numbers and superior coordination. Admiral, Vorthak resistance is beginning to collapse, Phillips reported. Their formation is breaking apart, and individual ships are attempting to flee the system. Morrison studied the tactical display showing the disintegration of Vorthak defenses. After hours of intense combat, the alien fleet that had seemed so formidable was being systematically destroyed by human forces that refused to give ground. All pursuit ships, intercept fleeing Vorthak vessels, Morrison ordered. No one leaves this system until the battle is over. The final phase of the battle saw humanity's true military capabilities revealed. Human ships moved with precision and coordination that the Vorthak had never encountered. Every human vessel knew its role and executed its mission with deadly efficiency. Commander Michelle Gray led a squadron of heavy cruisers in the final assault on the Vorthak flagship. The Dominion Spear was a massive vessel that had terrorized dozens of star systems, but now it faced destruction at the hands of beings it had considered inferior. All ships, concentrate fire on the enemy flagship, Gray commanded. Let's end this war. The combined firepower of 200 human warships focused on the Dominion Spear, overwhelming its defenses and reducing the mighty vessel to a drifting wreck. With their flagship destroyed and their fleet scattered, Vorthak resistance finally collapsed. Admiral Morrison watched as the last Vorthak ships either surrendered or were destroyed by pursuing human forces. The space around Kralos Prime was filled with debris from both sides, but the outcome was clear. Humanity had achieved total victory in the largest space battle ever fought. All ships stand down from combat operations, Morrison announced to the fleet. Secure all prisoners and begin search and rescue operations for survivors from both sides. The battle for Kralos Prime was over, but the consequences of humanity's overwhelming victory were just beginning. 700,000 human warships now controlled the home system of an empire that had ruled through fear and genocide for 1,000 years. As Morrison looked out at the defeated Vorthak homeworld, he faced a choice that would define humanity's future role in the galaxy. The aliens who had destroyed New Haven now lay helpless before human firepower, and the decision of what to do with them would echo through history. The Vorthak had shown no mercy to the 12 million humans of New Haven. Now Morrison had to decide whether humanity would respond with the same ruthlessness, or choose a different path that might lead to something better than endless cycles of revenge and destruction. The battle was won, but the real test of human character was about to begin. The aftermath of the battle for Kralos Prime left Admiral Jake Morrison facing the most difficult decision of his career. 700,000 human warships maintained their positions around the defeated Vorthak homeworld, their weapons trained, on a planet that housed billions of the same species that had murdered 12 million innocent humans at New Haven. Morrison stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, surrounded by holographic displays showing the complete destruction of the Vorthak fleet. Debris from thousands of alien vessels drifted through space, while the few surviving Vorthak ships transmitted surrender signals on all frequencies. "Admiral, we have total control of the system," reported Captain Ryan Phillips. "The Vorthak military command is requesting permission to negotiate terms of surrender." Around the command table, Morrison's senior officers waited for his decision. Some faces showed satisfaction at their overwhelming victory, while others reflected the grim reality of what they had accomplished. The largest space battle in galactic history was over, but the hardest choices lay ahead. Colonel Sam Mitchell spoke first, his voice carrying the anger that many humans felt. "Admiral, the Vorthak showed no mercy to New Haven. They wiped out 12 million innocent people without warning or provocation. I say we return the favor and show them what genocide really looks like." Admiral Kate Johnson shook her head firmly. "Sam, if we destroy their homeworld, we become exactly what they are. The whole point of this mission was to show that human lives have value. How do we prove that by committing the same atrocity they did?" Dr. Helen Brooks stepped forward with data about the Vorthak population. "Admiral, our scans show approximately 8 billion Vorthak civilians on the planet below. Most of them had nothing to do with the attack on New Haven. Their military made that decision." Morrison walked to the viewing window and looked down at the alien world that now lay helpless beneath his fleet. The planet was beautiful in its own way, with crystalline cities that reflected light like precious gems. But somewhere in those cities lived the leaders who had ordered the destruction of New Haven. "What about the other species enslaved by the Vorthak?" Morrison asked. "How many beings are being held prisoner throughout their empire?" Commander Lisa Carter consulted her intelligence files. "Our estimates suggest over 50 billion sentient beings from dozens of species have been enslaved by the Vorthak over the past 1,000 years. They're scattered across 12 star systems." The weight of those numbers settled over the command center like a heavy blanket. The Vorthak Empire wasn't just responsible for New Haven. They had been committing genocide and enslavement for centuries. The decision Morrison made here would affect the fate of billions of innocent beings. Captain Ben Taylor spoke up from his position near the tactical display. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from other alien species throughout the galaxy. Word of our victory is spreading fast. Everyone wants to know what humanity will do next." Morrison realized that this moment would define how the galaxy viewed humanity for generations to come. If they destroyed the Vorthak homeworld, other species would see humans as just another aggressive race seeking galactic domination. But if they showed restraint, it might demonstrate that humans were different from the typical conquerors. "Open a channel to the Vorthak planetary government," Morrison ordered. "I want to speak directly to whoever is in charge down there." The communication screen flickered to life, showing a tall, crystalline being that towered over the humans, even through the video link. This was Supreme Commander Kazrak, leader of the Vorthak military forces and architect of the New Haven attack. "Human. Admiral?" Kazrak spoke through translation devices, his voice carrying no hint of remorse. "You have achieved a temporary victory through superior numbers, but you cannot hold our empire forever. Eventually, you will leave, and when you do, we will rebuild our forces and hunt down every human colony in the galaxy." The audacity of the threat stunned the human officers. Even in defeat, even with 700,000 human warships pointed at his homeworld, the Vorthak commander showed no understanding of his situation. Morrison felt his anger rise, but he kept his voice steady. Commander Kazrak, you seem to misunderstand your position. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is defenseless. You are in no position to make threats. Kazrak's translated voice carried what sounded like contempt. You, carbon-based life forms, lack the will to do what is necessary. You will show mercy because you are weak, and that mercy will be your downfall. Morrison looked around the command center at his officers, seeing the same realization in their eyes. The Vorthak would never change, never learn, never accept that. Their way of thinking was wrong. They saw mercy as weakness and would interpret any restraint as an opportunity to rebuild and attack again. Admiral, Captain Jennifer Walsh reported from her position monitoring the fleet. We're detecting movement in the outer system. Vorthak ships that escaped the battle are trying to rally at their mining stations. Morrison made his decision with the clarity that comes from seeing all options clearly. All ships, stand down from planetary bombardment, he ordered, surprising everyone in the command center. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to ensure this never happens again. Colonel. Mitchell looked confused. Sir, if we don't destroy their ability to rebuild, they'll just attack us again in the future. Morrison smiled grimly. Sam, there are worse fates than death for a species like the Vorthak. Kate, begin implementing Operation Reconstruction. I want occupation forces on every Vorthak world within 72 hours. The plan that Morrison had been developing during the journey to Kralos Prime now went into action. Instead of destroying the Vorthak, humanity would do something far more devastating to their imperial pride. They would occupy and rebuild Vorthak civilization according to human principles. Captain Michelle Gray led the first wave of occupation, forces to the planet's surface. Her ships carried not just marines and weapons, but also engineers, doctors, teachers, and humanitarian aid workers. The message to the galaxy was clear. Humanity would respond to atrocities with overwhelming force, but would not become the monsters they fought against. The liberation of enslaved species throughout Vorthak space began immediately. Human ships spread throughout the 12-star empire, freeing billions of beings who had lived in bondage for generations. The Zelani, who had waited 300 years for freedom, wept with joy as human marines broke open their prison camps. Admiral Johnson coordinated the massive humanitarian effort from her flagship. This is going to be the largest relief operation in galactic history, she reported to Morrison. We're dealing with dozens of different species, each with their own needs and cultures. The transformation of Vorthak society proved more challenging than defeating their military. The silicon-based aliens had built their entire civilization around the concept of racial superiority and the subjugation of inferior life forms. Changing that mindset would take generations. Dr. Brooks worked with human xenopsychologists to develop programs that would help Vorthak civilians understand concepts that were alien to their culture: equality, cooperation, and the protection of the innocent. It was slow work, but gradually some Vorthak began to question the beliefs that had driven their empire to commit genocide. War crimes tribunals began processing the Vorthak military leaders responsible for New Haven's destruction. Commander Kazrak and his subordinates faced justice for their crimes, but they were given fair trials according to human legal principles rather than summary execution. Captain Danny Foster, now serving as humanity's military governor for the Kralos system, sent regular reports back to Earth about the progress of reconstruction. The former Vorthak Empire is slowly learning to function without slavery and conquest, he reported. It's not easy, but we're seeing real changes in how they think about other species. Years passed as humanity maintained its occupation of former Vorthak space. The 700,000 ships that had answered the call for justice gradually returned to their normal duties, but enough remained to ensure that the transition to freedom was permanent. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated something unprecedented: the ability to respond to genocide with overwhelming force while still maintaining moral principles. Other aggressive species took note that humans would not tolerate attacks on innocent civilians, while peaceful races found hope in humanity's protection of the weak. Admiral Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and commander of all human forces, stood in the New Haven Memorial on Earth 10 years after the battle. The memorial contained the names of all 12 million victims, carved in black stone that reflected the light of Earth's sun. We remember the fallen, Morrison spoke to the gathered crowd of survivors and families. We protect the innocent, and we never back down from those who would harm either. The ceremony was broadcast throughout human space and beyond, reaching the dozens of species that now lived in freedom thanks to humanity's intervention. The Zilani had rebuilt their civilization and become valuable allies. Other freed species had formed a coalition dedicated to preventing future genocides. Commander Julie Stevens, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to the reformed Vorthak government, sent her final report from